Hello everyone and welcome to my talk show, The Globe. I am your host, Bryony Whitelaw. Today we will be covering 3 of the many issues facing our world today. We will also be joined by a special guest to help us discuss one of these topics. Finally, I will be answering the big question: is it still possible to be a global citizen? And I'll give you a hint. I think it's a yes. But let's get started. Our first topic of today's show is global health, which addresses the underlying social, economic, environmental, and political detriments of health no matter what nation or province the obstacle lives. Now, during my research for this segment, I discovered I have a great interest in this subject. I have even decided to go back to American University's School of International Service to get a degree in global health. Now, let me tell you all, my amazing viewers, what I have learned. A virus or epidemic is ultimately contained through a multinational strategy and cooperation by doctors and researchers all over the world, which is why open borders are crucial to the successful containment and hopefully, in the end, preventative solution for the diseases that threaten our world today. President Trump's executive order, released in January of this year, banning foreign nationals from 7 countries from entering the United States, jeopardizes this collaboration. It also hurts the United States healthcare system, as we are already in a shortage of doctors and physicians, which this ban will make much worse. Today, nearly 1 in every 5 practicing physicians in the United States identifies as foreign-born. Accessible immigration pathways are vital to ensuring access to care and sustaining our medical workforce. It has been estimated that over 1,000 medical graduate students from the 7 countries named in the travel ban have already applied for residency programs here in the United States by the article "Executive Order on Immigration Threatens Our Nation's Health Security" by Daryl Kirk. Closing our borders to these individuals significantly weakens our healthcare system, as international graduate students help regions of the United States with shortage of doctors and physicians. The Association of American Medical Colleges reports a shortage ranging from 34,600 to 88,000 doctors by 2025, compared to what our growing and aging nation will need. This in turn hinders our ability to fight disease, which knows no national boundaries. International mobility is essential to the advancement of medical research and the healthcare needs of our nation and the world. Our next subject is spun or false information, which is filling our social media accounts and internet search histories. As engaged citizens, we need to be able to filter this information that is thrown at us in order to realize what is reliable and what is inaccurate. Stanford University discovered 82% of middle school students could not distinguish between an ad labeled sponsored content or a real news story on a news website's homepage. We could combat this issue by requiring middle and high school students to take media literacy courses before graduating. Media literacy courses can be taught in any language and require very little resources, so this is a great solution worldwide for this problem. Personally, I have a sister who is in middle school, and as a news reporter, I can't stand the thought of her being one of those 82% of students who could not tell the difference between real and fake information. So I thought about what media literacy courses should teach students, and I created a game plan that I hope even my sister will enjoy and learn a lot from. The class I created has 4 units. Unit 1 will teach students what media literacy is. They will also analyze their own media literacy skills and learn where they need to improve. Students will read the book Unspun: Finding Facts in a World of Disinformation by Brooks Jackson and Kathleen Jamison to go along with this unit's studies. Unit 2 will cover the difference between traditional media and social media, which is becoming increasingly important as it has been found that the younger generation relies on social media for their news. Students will learn the skills and language needed to decipher between reliable information and inaccurate information on their Twitter or Snapchat feeds. In Unit 3, we will dive into advertising, specifically how advertisers use social media to promote their products. Students will look at examples of spun information in advertisements. Then the big assignment for this unit is for the students to create their own television commercial that has no spun information. Finally, Unit 4, we will talk about bias in the media. The students will learn the different types of bias that the book read earlier in the course describes in a more in-depth way. For the final assignment of this unit, students will be given many examples of biased media, and they must identify which type of bias that the book pointed out is in each example. These skills are vital to making educated decisions as citizens not only of our local community, but of the world. For specific example, political campaigns here in the United States are filled with falsehoods. Voters should not cast their ballots permeated with disordered information about any candidates. The last topic of today's show is reconciliation and global leadership, and I'm going to talk specifically in an international business setting. For this, I'm going to be interviewing our special guest, Ken Whitelaw. He works for DLL, a global vendor finance company with focus on agricultural equipment. He is the global management team leader for the Food and Agricultural Business Unit, specifically responsible for the commercial activities in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. Additionally, Whitelaw is on the board of a U.S. joint venture with an Indian company, Mahindra, who leads the world's tractor sales. Is it possible to have a consistent global business strategy in the company?
I think it's possible to have a strategy, but it has to be relatively high level to understand what the company's main goals are, but allow some flexibility at the country level. So in our case, we're a vendor finance company, as I mentioned, which means we partner with equipment manufacturers and distributors to help sell their products. We have four different verticals, food and ag being one. And so we're very specific in terms of our strategy in that regard. But the way we go to market in each of the countries can vary quite a bit due to local legislation, regulation, and so forth, and also taking into account of the different cultural aspects as well. So I think the strategy can be consistent globally, but the execution and the flexibility within that strategy has to be very important to allow that to occur the way it should.
Okay. Can you elaborate then on a specific time it was challenging to bring people of all cultures together and how you overcame it?
So I worked on a project for a program that we still have today back in 2010, and the project was to set up a vendor finance program in Russia. And the customer, Italian company, so a number of the people I was working with from their side were from Italy, including the attorneys predominantly, but obviously a Russian program, so there was a number of Russian individuals from their side. And in addition to a gentleman that was my counterpart was from the UK, and his supervisor was from Australia. So you had a lot of different cultures on their side, and including on our side, because a lot of our team Russian, but also we had some oversight from our headquarters, in which we happen to be a Dutch company. So you had different cultures all in mind, all working on this, all with the same goal in mind, but sometimes the way to conduct business would vary, and so you had to work and be patient and make sure you understood where the other people were coming from, both on our side and their side, in my instance, to understand all the aspects, and then work hard to find the middle ground that ultimately we did to put a contract together, launch a program, which again today is actually quite successful. So I think somehow also the process to get there has been beneficial to the program being successful because a lot of trust was built up in that time period as well.
That makes sense. What strategies have you found most effective when working with people from all different backgrounds in order to finish a deal or make a new whatever you just described?
A different program. So I think
yes.
I think at the end of the day, a lot of the skills have to be one of listening and being culturally aware, but without being too prone to assume stereotypes are always correct. Sometimes there's some truth to stereotypes for different cultures, but they're not fundamentally true for everybody there, and they're probably not fundamentally true for everybody in the same way either, if at all. And so you have to listen to people from different cultures, particularly when negotiating something, and understand from their perspective and ask more questions to figure out what it is actually that's motivating them. Because sometimes what we, or if you're in a Western company or an American company particularly, might assume is what they're asking for because that's what an American would ask for. That's not necessarily what they're actually saying. So I think a lot of it is just patience, asking questions, understanding where they're coming from, and then trying to find where it makes sense to compromise, and frankly, sometimes where it makes sense not to. And also, different cultures have different views of compromising. Some view that as a sign of weakness. Some actually view it as a sign of strength. So you have to know when it's appropriate to use whatever negotiating strategy to get to the right deal. But I think the main thing also, again, it's not getting a deal done. It's what happens after the deal that makes it successful. So you have to develop a rapport and trust with the people you're working with, so they know that you realize you have the best interest of both parties in mind when you put something together.
Okay. What are your thoughts on running a global company in terms of the diversity of the executive leaders of the company?
So I think it's actually very important that the executive leadership both have actual diversity and they're also perceived in such a way that makes them global. So in our company, for example, for many years our executive leadership were all Dutch because we are a Dutch company. And there's absolutely nothing wrong. I mean, the Dutch leadership were very strong. They're very globally focused. But if you have top 4 or 5 people who are all one nationality, whatever that nationality may be, that doesn't give the appearance of having a global view. So now in our company, out of the top 5 leaders, you have 2 are Dutch, 2 are American, and 1's Belgian. And even everyone in that nationality have a lot of backgrounds and living in different countries as well. So I think that's actually very important. You have diversity, at least in this instance, from a geographic perspective. Our company does not have much in the way of diversity, however, from a gender or a race perspective. But I think that's something that needs to be developed over time. So I do think it's important to have that, and that people, both understand the leaders have different perspectives amongst themselves, and therefore we'll probably have debate, and therefore we'll get to a right resolution because you have to compromise in that regard. But also they're perceived that way, and I think there's the 2 separate things there, and they're both very important.
Okay. And finally, do you believe, is it possible to have a global culture in a company?
I think it's actually very possible, and I think our company has a very, very strong culture. So I have the privilege to travel to many of the offices DLL has globally, and while the nationalities are different, the local customs are different, and sometimes a lot different, the company culture is very, very strong in all the places. So it's a company with high integrity. It values people to take the extra effort on behalf of our customers to get things done. It's a quite entrepreneurial company as well. So I think it's a very open and transparent company, and you see that basically in all offices to a certain extent. Now, some cultures are a little bit more hierarchical than others, and you see that. But I think overall the company culture is very consistent and strong, and I think that's actually something that's very, very important if you're going to be global. You can be a global company and have really little consistency, but that doesn't make you really global. It just makes you a series of individual companies that may have the common ownership. And at least in our instance, that's not the case. It's a very consistent approach globally, which I think is actually something that sets us apart in a positive way.
Well, thank you so much for your insight.
You are most welcome.
Even though we will still be defined by the things that are important to us, including love of our own country, we can and do still care about humanity. We care about impoverished children, and we care about the injustices we see in the world today, while remaining rooted in and proud of our own culture. I do not see being a citizen of our birth country as a factor preventing us from being citizens of the world as well. In fact, these traditional identities shape who we are and give meaning to our actions. But as a result of living in this increasingly globalized world, a global citizen knows that we have an additional layer of responsibility. We may not have nailed this extra layer of responsibility yet, but it's waiting for us to embrace it. In order to do this, we must see the beauty in our differences, not fear them. We must realize the values of our global community that have been evolving since World War II. These values include environmental protection, religious freedom, the elimination of poverty, and gender equity. These efforts have been made by the creation of international organizations and transnational corporations. I believe global citizenship means caring about humanity as a whole, and I believe this is still possible. Just imagine how much of a better place the world will be as more and more people start to care about each other, no matter their cultural backgrounds. And that's our show today, everyone. Thank you for watching The Globe. We'll see you next time. Ways are vital to the matter where